The rain started as tiny drops on David's camera lens. He wiped it clean and kept walking deeper into the forest. His assignment was simple: take pictures of wild animals for a nature magazine. The pay was good, and he loved being outdoors. But now, 3 hours later, everything looked the same. Tall trees everywhere, and the path he thought he was following had disappeared. David stopped and looked around. The rain was getting heavier. Dark clouds covered the sky, making it feel like evening even though it was only afternoon. He pulled out his phone. No signal, of course. He was in the middle of nowhere in the Oregon wilderness. Great, he said to himself. Just great. The wind picked up, shaking the trees above him. Raindrops turned into a steady downpour. David's jacket was good, but not for this kind of weather. He needed shelter, and he needed it fast. He kept walking, hoping to find a trail or at least a big tree to hide under. The forest was getting darker by the minute. Lightning flashed in the distance, followed by thunder. This wasn't just rain anymore, it was becoming a real storm. That's when he saw it. Through the trees, maybe 100 yards away, was a small wooden cabin. Smoke was coming from the chimney. David felt relief wash over him. He wasn't going to get soaked after all. He ran toward the cabin, his camera bag bouncing on his shoulder. By the time he reached the front door, he was breathing hard. The cabin looked old, but well kept. There were solar panels on the roof and scientific equipment on the small porch. Maybe it belonged to researchers or park rangers. David knocked on the door. Hello? Anyone home? Footsteps came from inside. The door opened slowly, and a woman appeared. She looked to be in her late 20s, with brown hair pulled back and tired eyes. She was wearing a simple sweater and jeans. What caught David's attention was how nervous she seemed. Oh, she said, looking surprised. I wasn't expecting anyone. I'm sorry to bother you, David said quickly. I'm a photographer, and I got lost in the forest. This storm came out of nowhere. I was wondering if I could wait it out here, just until it passes. The woman looked past him at the rain, then back at his face. She seemed to be thinking hard about something. A photographer? Yes, for wildlife magazines. I was trying to get some shots of deer and maybe bears, but I lost the trail. David held up his camera as proof. I promise I'm not some crazy person. I just need a dry place to sit for a while. She looked at her watch, a nervous habit David noticed. My research partner will be back tomorrow morning, but I suppose. She looked at the storm again. You can't stay out in this weather. Come in. Thank you so much. I'm David, by the way. I'm Lisa, she said, stepping aside to let him in. The inside of the cabin was warm and cozy. There was a fireplace with a good fire going. The main room had a small kitchen, a dining table, and a living area with 2 chairs. David noticed more scientific equipment, computers, maps on the walls, and books about wildlife research. You're a scientist? David asked, setting his wet jacket on a chair. Something like that, Lisa said. She was still acting nervous, checking her watch again. I study animal behavior in this area. How long have you been lost? About 3 hours? I thought I knew these woods better than I do. David looked around the cabin. It was comfortable, but felt somehow empty. Like someone was just staying here temporarily. This storm is really bad. Good thing you were here. Lisa nodded, but didn't seem to be really listening. She kept looking out the window, even though there wasn't much to see except rain and trees. Yes, good thing, she said quietly. David sat down by the fire. The warmth felt amazing after being cold and wet. Do you stay here alone? I mean, until your partner comes back? Most of the time, yes. Lisa's voice was quiet. It gets very lonely out here. Something in the way she said it made David look at her more carefully. She seemed sad, not just lonely. And she kept checking that watch like she was worried about time. When did you say your partner is coming back? David asked. Tomorrow morning, early. Lisa sat down in the other chair, but she didn't relax. He doesn't like it when there are unexpected visitors. That was an odd thing to say. David wondered what kind of research partner wouldn't want visitors during a storm. Well, I'll be gone as soon as the weather clears. I don't want to cause any problems. Lisa looked at him for a long moment. You seem like a nice person, David. It's been a while since I've talked to someone. Someone normal? What do you mean? She shook her head quickly. Nothing. I just meant someone from outside this place. I've been here for months, and it's just me. And she stopped talking and looked at her watch again. The storm was getting worse outside. Wind was howling through the trees and rain was hitting the windows hard. David realized he might be stuck here all night. I have some food. If you're hungry, Lisa offered. It's not much, but there's soup and bread. That would be great, thank you. As Lisa moved around the small kitchen, David noticed she seemed to be listening for something. Every few minutes, she would stop what she was doing and look toward the door, like she expected someone to walk in. Are you okay? David asked. You seem worried about something. Lisa stopped stirring the soup. For a moment, she looked like she was going to say something important. Then she shook her head. I'm fine, just not used to having company. But David could tell she wasn't fine. There was something in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or sadness. He'd seen that look before in his photography work when he took pictures of people who had been through difficult times. The soup was warm and good. They ate mostly in silence, with just the sound of the storm outside. But David kept noticing little things, the way Lisa jumped slightly when thunder crashed, how she kept looking at the door, and most of all how she seemed to be fighting with herself about something, like she wanted to say something but couldn't. As the evening went on, David began to wonder what exactly he had walked into. This wasn't just a research station. Something else was going on here, something that made Lisa nervous and scared. And tomorrow morning, her partner would return. The storm wasn't stopping. If anything, it was getting worse. David looked out the window and saw trees bending in the wind. There was no way he could leave tonight even if he wanted to. He was stuck here until morning. Lisa had been quiet during dinner. She kept checking her watch and looking toward the door. David tried to make conversation, but she seemed lost in her own thoughts. Something was definitely wrong, Lisa. David said gently. Are you sure you're okay? You seem really worried about something? She looked up from her barely touched soup. For a moment her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away quickly. I'm fine, just tired. You keep checking your watch. Are you worried about your partner coming back? Lisa's hand stopped halfway to her watch. She stared at David like he had just read her mind. You notice a lot of things, don't you? It's part of my job. When you're taking pictures of animals, you learn to watch for small signs. Body language, nervous movements. You're scared of something. Lisa was quiet for a long time. The only sounds were the storm outside and the crackling of the fire. Finally, she spoke in a whisper. He's not my research partner. What do you mean? He's my husband. And he's not a nice person, David. David felt his stomach drop. The way she said it, the fear in her voice, he suddenly understood why she seemed so nervous. What do you mean he's not nice? Lisa stood up and walked to the window. She wrapped her arms around herself like she was cold, even though the room was warm. He doesn't like me talking to other people. Doesn't like me having friends. He checks on me all the time. It doesn't sound like a healthy relationship. It's not. Lisa's voice was so quiet, David had to lean forward to hear her. Started slowly. First, he said my friends were bad influences. Then he said my family didn't understand our love. Before I knew it, I was here, in the middle of nowhere, with no way to contact anyone. David felt anger building in his chest. That's not okay, Lisa. No one should control you like that. I know, she turned around to face him. But you don't understand. He's smart. He's respected. He has friends in important places, and he's convinced everyone that I'm the problem. What do you mean? Lisa sat back down, but she kept looking. At the door, he tells people I'm mentally unstable, that I make up stories, that I need to be watched because I might hurt myself. David shook his head. But that's not true. I know it's not true. You know it's not true. But who's going to believe me? A woman alone in the woods, with no job, no money, no friends. Against him, a successful scientist with a good reputation. The pieces were starting to fit together. In David's mind, is that why you're so scared about him coming back tomorrow? Lisa nodded. He'll want to know everything. Who you are, what you said, how long you were here. He'll be angry that I let you in. But you couldn't just leave me out in the storm. He won't see it that way. He'll think I planned it. He'll think I'm trying to get help or send messages to the outside world. David felt sick. Lisa, you need to leave. Come with me when the storm stops. We can get help. Where would I go? I don't have any money. I don't even have my own identification anymore. He keeps everything locked up. There are places that help people in situations like yours. Shelters, programs. Lisa laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. He knows about all those places.
He's
made donations to them. He knows the people who run them. He's too smart, David. He's thought of everything. David stood up and started pacing. There has to be something we can do. There's nothing. Lisa's voice was flat now, like she had given up. I've tried to leave before. He always finds me, and then things get worse. What do you mean worse? Lisa pulled up her sleeve slightly. David saw faint marks on her arm. Old bruises that had faded but were still visible. He's careful. He never leaves marks where people can see them. And he's very good at making it look like accidents. David felt his hands clench into fists. This is crazy. You can't stay here. I have to. There's nowhere else to go. They sat in silence for a while. David's mind was racing, trying to think of solutions. But every idea he came up with, Lisa had already thought of. Her husband really had trapped her completely. Lisa, David said finally, how long has this been going on? 2 years. We've been married for 2 years, but it really started about a year ago. That's when he brought me here for the first time. Said it was for his research, but there's no real research happening here. What do you mean? Look around. Do you see? Any real scientific work? Those computers barely work. The equipment is old. This isn't a research station. It's a prison. David looked around the cabin with new eyes. She was right. Everything looked like props, like someone was pretending to be a scientist, but didn't. Really know what they were doing? So what does he actually do? His money from somewhere. I think his family has money. He doesn't need to work, so he just ... watches me. Make sure I don't talk to anyone or go anywhere. That's not living. Lisa, that's just surviving. I know. She looked at her watch again. 12 more hours until he comes back. Then it'll be months before I see another person. David felt helpless. Here was someone who clearly needed help, but everything she said made sense. How could he help someone who was trapped so completely? I'm sorry, Lisa said suddenly. I shouldn't have told you all this. Now you're involved, and he won't like that. I'm not worried about him. You should be. He's dangerous when he's angry. David sat down across from her again. Lisa, in 12 hours I'm going to have to leave. I have a life to get back to, but I can't just walk away knowing you're trapped here. You have to? There's nothing else you can do. What if there was something I could do? What if I could help you feel less alone, even if it's just for tonight? Lisa looked at him with surprise. What do you mean? What if we didn't? Spend your last night of freedom, being scared? What if we just ... talked, like normal people, like friends? For the first time since he'd met her, Lisa smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. I'd like that. It's been so long since someone just talked to me like a normal person, and so they talked. They talked about David's photography work, about places he'd traveled, about books they'd both read. Lisa told him about her life before her husband, about her dreams of becoming a teacher, about the family she missed. As the night went on, David noticed something changing. Lisa was relaxing. She was laughing at his stories. She seemed more like herself, whoever that was before her husband took it away. But every hour that passed meant they were getting closer to morning. Morning meant her husband would return. It was past midnight when Lisa stopped talking. They had been sharing stories for hours, and David could see how much it meant to her. For the first time since he'd arrived, she looked almost peaceful. But then she checked her watch again, and the fear came back to her eyes. 6 more hours, she whispered. David had been thinking the same thing. In 6 hours, her husband would return, and this small moment of freedom would be over. He'd been watching Lisa's face change as she talked about her old life, the person she used to be before everything changed. Lisa, David said carefully, "What's going to happen when he gets back?" She was quiet for a long moment. He'll ask questions. Lots of questions. He'll want to know everything about you, what you said, what I said, how long you stayed. And then he'll decide if he believes me or not. If he thinks I'm telling the truth, maybe things will go back to normal. If he does, she didn't finish the sentence. David felt his chest tighten. What if you didn't have to face that? What if you came with me when I leave? I can't. I told you there's nowhere to go, but what if there was? What if I helped? You find a way? Lisa shook her head. You don't understand. He's not just going to let me walk away. He'll follow us. He'll find us. And then he'll make sure I never get another chance to leave. They sat in silence, listening to the storm outside. It was starting to calm down, but it was still raining. Hard, David, Lisa said suddenly. Can I ask you something? Of course, do you have someone? Someone who loves you? David thought about his girlfriend back in the city. They'd been together for a year, and things were good between them. Yes, I do. What's that like? Having someone who actually cares about you? The question broke David's heart. It's feeling safe. It's feeling like you can be yourself without worrying about making someone angry. Lisa nodded. I used to know what that felt like. Before I met him, I had friends who cared about me. My sister and I were close. I had a normal life. You can have that again. No, I can't. Too much has happened. Too much time has passed. Even if I could leave, I wouldn't know how to live normally anymore. David stood up and walked to the window. The rain was lighter now, and he could see the sky getting a little brighter. Dawn was coming. Lisa, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Okay. Are you afraid he might hurt you? Really hurt you? Lisa was quiet for so long that David turned around to look at her. She was staring at the fire, and tears were running down her face. Yes, she whispered. I think he might. He's been getting worse lately. More angry, more suspicious. Sometimes he looks at me like he hates me. Then you have to leave. We have to find a way. There is no way, David. I've tried everything. I've thought about it every day for months. There's no escape. David sat back down next to her. If we call the police when we get to town, with what evidence? He's never left marks where people can see them. He's too smart for that. And he knows people in law enforcement. They'll believe him over me. What about your family, your sister? He convinced them I'm sick, that I need his help. They think he's taking care of me. David felt helpless. Every solution he thought of, Lisa had already considered and found impossible. Lisa, he said quietly, what do you want? If you could have anything right now, what would it be? She looked at him with surprise. No one's asked me what I want. In a long time, I'm asking. Lisa thought for a moment. I want to feel normal again. Just for a little while. I want to remember what it's like to be with someone who sees me as a person, not as something to control. You are a person, Lisa. You're smart and kind and brave. I don't feel brave. You are. You've survived this long. You've kept yourself together in an impossible situation. It takes courage. Lisa looked at him with tears in her eyes. David, I need to tell you something. I need you to not judge me for it. I won't judge you. Don't know you have someone. Back home, I know you have a life to go back to. But right now, in this moment, you're the only good thing in my world. David felt his heart racing. He could see where this was going, and he didn't know what to say. I know it's wrong, Lisa continued. I know it's not fair to you. But I'm scared that after tonight, I might never feel human again. He's been taking pieces of me away, bit by bit. Soon there might be nothing left. Lisa, ... I'm not asking you to stay. Not asking you to save me. I know you can't. But I'm asking you to help me remember, just for tonight, what it feels like to be cared about. David stared at her, his mind racing. Everything about this situation was wrong. But looking at Lisa, really looking at her, he could see the pain in her eyes. The desperate need to feel like she mattered to someone. I care about you, he said quietly. I've only known you for a few hours, but I care about what happens to you. Then help me feel that. Help me remember what it's like to be treated with kindness. David stood up and walked to the other side of the room, fighting with himself. Part of him wanted to help her. She was clearly in pain and needed someone to show her compassion. But another part of him knew this was crossing a line. Lisa, I want to help you, but I don't know if this is the right way. There is no right way in this situation, David. There's only what's going to happen. In a few hours, he'll be back, and I'll go back to being nobody. But right now, I could be somebody who mattered to a good person. The rain was getting lighter outside. David could see the first hints of dawn through the trees. Time was running out. I don't want to take advantage of you, David said. You're not? This is my choice. It's maybe the only real choice I've had in months. David looked at her face. She wasn't crying anymore. She looked determined, like she had made up her mind about something important. Are you sure this is what you want? I'm sure. David, you're a good person. I can tell. And right now, I need to be close to someone good. Someone who sees me as human. David walked back to her and sat down. See you, Lisa. I see how strong you are and how much you've been through and how you're still fighting. Then don't let me fight alone tonight. Let me remember what it feels like to be close to someone who cares. David took her hand. It was shaking slightly, but her grip was firm. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, outside, the storm was ending. But inside the cabin, two people were finding a moment of human connection in the middle of a terrible situation. David didn't know if he was making the right choice, but he knew that sometimes there are no right choices, only human ones. David woke up to the sound of a car engine. For a moment, he was confused about where he was. Then everything came rushing back. The storm, the cabin. He looked around and saw Lisa sitting by the window, fully dressed, watching the driveway. He's early, she whispered without turning around. David sat up quickly and checked his watch. It was only 7 in the morning. Lisa's husband wasn't supposed to be back until later. How early? David asked, reaching for his clothes. Hours, maybe 3. Lisa's voice was calm, but David could see her hands shaking. You need to get dressed. Fast.
How?
David got dressed as quickly as he could. His mind was racing. What would they say? How would they explain his being there? Lisa, what's the plan? You got lost in the storm? You knocked on the door? And I let you stay until morning. That's it. Nothing else happened. Will you believe? That, Lisa finally turned to look at him. Her face was pale, but her expression was determined. He has to. It's the only story that makes sense. The car engine stopped. David heard a car door slam shut. Remember, Lisa said quickly, you're just a photographer who got lost. Be polite, but not too friendly. Don't mention anything personal about me or ask too many questions about him. Footsteps approached the cabin. David's heart was pounding, but Lisa seemed to have transformed. The scared, vulnerable woman from last night was gone. In her place was someone who looked calm and controlled. The door opened without a knock. Lisa, a man's voice called out. Lisa replied. In the main room, a tall man walked in wearing expensive outdoor gear and carrying a large backpack. He had dark hair and sharp eyes that immediately focused on David. This had to be Robert, Lisa's husband. Who's this? Robert asked. His voice was friendly enough, but David could hear something cold underneath. This is David, Lisa said calmly. He's a photographer who got lost in the storm last night. I let him stay until morning. Robert set down his backpack and walked over to David. Lost, huh? That's dangerous out here. These woods can be tricky, sir, David replied, standing up. I really appreciate your wife letting me stay. Why, would have been in real trouble without shelter. Robert smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Well, Lisa's always been too trusting. Sometimes that gets her into trouble. The way he said it made David's skin crawl. It sounded like a threat disguised as a joke. I was just about to leave, David said. I don't want to impose any longer. Oh, no need to rush off, Robert said. I'd love to hear about your photography work. It must be exciting, traveling around, meeting new people. David didn't like where this was going, but he couldn't just run out the door. It's interesting work. I mostly do nature photography for magazines. And what magazine sent you out here? Wilderness Today. They wanted shots of the local wildlife. Robert nodded slowly. And did you get the shots you needed?
Ow!
Well, the storm kind of interrupted things. I'll probably have to come back another time. It's too bad. Though I suppose it worked out well for you, finding our cabin. What are the chances of that? David felt like he was being tested, but he wasn't sure what the right answers were. Just lucky, I guess. I saw the smoke from your chimney through the trees. Robert turned to Lisa. And you just let him in? Without knowing anything about him? He was soaked and lost, Lisa said. I couldn't leave him outside in that storm. Of course not. You're too kind-hearted. Robert's tone suggested this wasn't a compliment. Did you two have a nice chat? We talked a little about photography and nature. Nothing important. Robert walked around the room, looking at things like he was checking to make sure everything was exactly where he left it. David, do you have family? Yes, sir. Parents in California, and a girlfriend back in Portland. A girlfriend.
How?
Nice. She must worry when you're out in the wilderness alone. She does. I actually need to call her when I get back to town. Let her know I'm okay, of course. Communication is so important in relationships. Lisa and I believe in always knowing where the other person is and what they're doing. Don't we, Lisa? Yes, Lisa said quietly. David noticed she hadn't looked directly at her husband since he arrived. She was staring at the floor or out the window, but never at Robert. Robert continued, I hope Lisa was a good hostess. Sometimes she forgets her manners when she's been alone too long. She was very kind. I really can't thank you both enough. Oh, don't thank me. I wasn't here. This was all Lisa's decision. It's the way Robert said it, made it clear that Lisa, making decisions on her own, was not something he approved of. David could feel the tension in the room growing. He needed to leave, but he was worried about what would happen to Lisa after he was gone. Well, David said, I should probably get going. Try to find my way back to the main trail. Actually, Robert said, why don't I give you a ride? These woods can be confusing, and I'd hate for you to get lost again. It wasn't really a suggestion. David could tell that Robert wanted to get him away from Lisa in the cabin. That's very generous of you, but I don't want to trouble you. No trouble at all, I insist. Lisa, say goodbye to our guest. Lisa finally looked up. For just a moment, her eyes met David's. In that look, he saw everything: gratitude, fear, and a kind of sad acceptance. Goodbye, David. Thank you for the conversation. Thank you for saving my life, David replied, hoping she understood he meant more than just giving him shelter. Robert was already putting on his jacket. Come on, David, let's get you back to civilization. David gathered his camera bag and followed Robert outside. As they walked to the car, David looked back at the cabin. Lisa was standing in the doorway, watching them leave. She raised her hand in a small wave, and David waved back. She's quite something, isn't she? Robert said as they got into his truck. She seems very nice. Oh, she is. But she's also fragile. The isolation out here is hard on her. Sometimes she imagines things or says things that aren't quite true. Oh. David didn't respond. He could see what Robert was doing, trying to make him doubt anything Lisa might have said. As they drove through the forest, Robert kept talking. Lisa's been through some difficult times. Mental health issues, you know. That's part of why we come out here. The quiet helps her. See? I hope she didn't say anything to worry you. Sometimes she tells stories that sound concerning, but they're not based in reality. David's hands clenched in his lap. Robert was being very careful with his words, but the message was clear. Don't believe anything Lisa told you, she seemed. Fine to me, David said. Good, good. It's what I like to hear. They drove in silence for a while. David watched the trees pass by, thinking about Lisa alone in that cabin with this man. Everything Robert said made David more convinced that Lisa had been telling the truth. Here we are, Robert said finally, pulling into a parking area near a ranger station. This should get you back to where you need to be. Thank you for the ride. My pleasure. And David, I hope you understand how important it is that Lisa has privacy. She can handle unexpected visitors well, and it's better for her recovery. If she's not disturbed, of course. Good. I'd hate for anyone to accidentally cause her any stress by showing up unannounced or asking questions about her. David got out of the truck and shouldered his camera bag. I understand. I'm sure you do. You seem like a smart man. Have a safe trip home. Robert drove away, leaving David standing alone in the parking lot. He felt sick to his stomach. Everything about that man had felt wrong, and now Lisa was alone with him again. David pulled out his phone. Had a signal now. He thought about calling the police, but what would he say? That a woman seemed scared of her husband? that she had asked him to believe her story about being trapped? He looked back toward the forest, knowing Lisa was somewhere in there, probably, being questioned about every detail of his visit, and there was nothing he could do to help her. 3 weeks had passed since David left the forest, but he couldn't stop thinking about Lisa. He tried to focus on his work, editing photos and taking new assignments, but her face kept appearing in his mind. The fear in her eyes when her husband returned, the way she had waved goodbye from the cabin doorway. David's girlfriend, Amy, noticed he was distracted. "You've been different since you got back from that forest assignment," she said one evening as they sat in his apartment. "What happened out there?" David had been dreading this conversation. How could he explain what had happened without destroying his relationship? How could he make Amy understand that it wasn't about wanting someone else, but about trying to help someone who needed it? "I met someone who was in trouble," he said carefully. "A woman whose husband was controlling her. I've been worried about her." Amy looked at him suspiciously. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind where someone needs help but can't ask for it. The kind where someone is trapped and scared." "And you helped her?" David was quiet for a long moment. "I tried to. I don't know if it made any difference." Amy studied his face. She could tell there was more to the story, but she didn't push. "Are you going to do anything else about it?" "I don't know what I can do. I don't even know how to find her again." But that wasn't entirely true. David had been doing research. He looked up Robert online and found information about his background. The man was indeed a scientist, but not the kind who would need a research station in the middle of nowhere. His work was theoretical, done in universities and labs. David had also tried to find any record of Lisa, but it was like she didn't exist. No social media profiles, no work history he could find, no trace of her anywhere online. It was as if Robert had erased her from the world. The thought haunted him. What if Lisa had been telling the truth about everything? What if she really was as trapped as she claimed? David made a decision. He had to go back. The next weekend, he drove back to the forest. He told Amy he was going on another photography assignment, which wasn't entirely a lie. He did bring his camera. Finding the cabin again was harder than he expected. Everything looked different in daylight, and without the storm to guide him, he had to rely on his memory of the landscape. It took him most of the day, but he finally found the small dirt road that led to the cabin. The place looked abandoned. David parked his car at a distance and walked carefully toward the cabin. The windows were dark, and there was no smoke coming. From the chimney, the scientific equipment that had been on the porch was gone. He knocked on the door. No answer. He tried the handle. The door was unlocked. Inside, the cabin was empty. Not just empty of people, empty of everything. The furniture was gone. The kitchen supplies were gone. Even the maps on the walls had been taken down. It looked like no one had ever lived there. David searched every room looking for any sign of what had happened to Lisa. In the bedroom, he found something that made his blood run cold. There were scratches on the wooden floor, like someone had been dragged across it. On the wall, barely visible, someone had scratched a single word: help. David took pictures of everything with his camera, then drove to the nearest ranger. "Station, excuse me," he said to the ranger on duty. "I'm looking for information about a research station in Sector 7. There was a scientist named Robert and his wife Lisa working there." The ranger looked confused. "I don't know of any research stations in that area. Are you sure you have the right location?" "I was there 3 weeks ago. There was definitely a cabin." "Well, there are some old cabins scattered around the forest. Sometimes people rent them privately. But we don't have any official research projects running in Sector 7. David's heart sank. Is there any way to find out who might have been renting a cabin in that area? Not really. Most of the private rentals go through agencies in town. You could try calling them. David spent the rest of the day calling rental agencies, but none of them had any record of Robert or Lisa renting a cabin. It was like they had never existed. Oh, that night, David sat in his hotel room staring at the photos he'd taken of the empty cabin. He uploaded them to his computer and zoomed in on the scratches on the wall. The word help was definitely there, carved into the wood. With something sharp, David knew he had to contact the police. The next morning, he drove to the local police station and asked to speak with someone about a missing person. "I need to report a woman who might be in danger," he told the officer. "What's her name? Lisa? I don't know her last name." "Did you last see her? 3 weeks ago? What makes you think she's in danger?" David tried to explain the situation, but he could see the officer wasn't taking him seriously. A woman with no last name, no address, no proof she ever existed, a husband who might not be her husband, cabin that might not be a research station. "Sir," the officer said finally, "without more information, there's not much we can do." Do. "You have any proof this woman exists? Photos? Witnesses? Anything?" David realized he had nothing. He'd been so focused on Lisa's situation that he hadn't thought about documenting it. And now she was gone, and he had no way to prove she'd ever been there. "I understand this is frustrating," the officer continued, "but we get reports like this sometimes. People meet someone briefly, lose contact, and worry something bad happened. Usually, the person just moved on with their life." David left the police station feeling defeated. He drove home, but he couldn't let it go. Over the next few months, David found himself changing, started volunteering at a domestic violence shelter in the city. He learned about the signs of abuse, about how abusers isolate their victims, about how hard it is for people to leave dangerous relationships. Everything he learned made him more convinced that Lisa had been telling the truth. He also started taking different kinds of photography assignments. Instead of just nature photos, he began documenting stories of people who had survived difficult situations. People who had escaped abuse, people who had overcome trauma, people who had found ways to rebuild their lives. Amy noticed the change. "In him, you're different now," she said one day. "More serious, more focused on helping people." "Maybe that's not a bad thing," David replied. "It's not bad, it's just different." "Did that woman you met really affect you that much?" David thought about how to answer. "She showed me that people can be trapped in ways I never understood, and that sometimes, when someone asks for help, it might be the only chance they get." "Do you think about her often?" "Every day." Amy was quiet for a moment. "I hope she's okay wherever she is." "Me too." But David wasn't sure Lisa was okay. Sometimes he woke up in the middle of the night, thinking about her scratching help into the wall of that cabin, wondering if she was still alive, still trapped somewhere, still hoping someone would remember her and come looking. He never stopped. Looking. Every few months, he would drive back to the forest and search for any sign of the cabin. Any clue about what had happened to Lisa. He never found anything. David also never stopped helping other people. He donated money to shelters, volunteered his time, and used his photography to tell stories that needed to be told. He couldn't save Lisa, but maybe he could help save someone else. Years later, David would still think about that night in the cabin, would wonder if he had made the right choice, if he had helped Lisa feel less alone in her final hours of freedom, or if he had just added another layer of pain to an already terrible situation. He would never know for sure. But he knew that for one night, he had seen someone who was invisible to the rest of the world, and he had chosen not to look away. In a world where people often ignore others' pain, maybe that was something. Sometimes late at night, David would hope that wherever Lisa was, she remembered that night too. That she remembered feeling like she mattered to someone, like she was seen and cared about. That even if everything else in her life was dark, she had that one moment of light to hold on to. Wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Got it. With something, and sometimes something is all you can give.